Hello, everyone, and welcome to the History Quiz with me, Joshua Daniels, May 2024. This is a series of monthly quizzes I'm releasing on the penultimate Sunday of every month throughout the year of 2024. They, of course, as you can probably tell, obviously have a specialist focused on history, and I try to make them as accessible for all by covering different periods, different geographical areas, etc., so that way everyone gets a fair shot at the history that will be covered. Simple rules for those of you who haven't played before. Number one, no conferring. You can play as teams or on your own, and that does mean actually not playing against anyone else. You can actually play just to test your own historical knowledge. But if you are playing against other people, whether you're in a team or individuals, please no discussion or cheating between teams and players. That means everyone has to just work off their own steam. Speaking of which, number two, no using search engines or internet to find out the answers. So there is no pausing of the video to search something, there's no secret Googling while it's going on, it all has to be from your own head. Number three, one answer per question, 1 point per correct answer. So I will not ask you to list multiple answers for one question, and it will all only be worth 1 point per the correct answer. Speaking of which, number four, there is 5 categories, 30 questions with 15 seconds to answer each one, but you do not need to answer all the questions. You will not, however, get a point for questions left unanswered. You will simply get 0 for any unanswered questions or any incorrect answers. So there will be no penalisation, no losing of points, but in order to score it, you have to put the correct answer. You will not gain any, there were no half points or such, if you do not put a answer at all, or if you put the incorrect answer. To that end, let's begin with our first category. So for those of you who've never played before, the first category is Famous Faces. It's 10 questions, and what I will do is show you 10 images. Each image will be of a famous historical figure. To get the correct answer, you have to put down the name of that historical figure. So, without further ado, let's move on to the first question. Question number 1. Who is this? Face number 1. Face number 2. Face number 3. Face number 4. Page number 5. Page number 6. Page number 7. Page number 8. Page number 9. And the final face, face number 10. And that marks the end of the first category. So let's recollect ourselves and move on to the second category, which is events and dates. So this one's a little bit different. You'll have a minute to answer this because it is essentially all one question. So on the left hand side of the screen, labelled 1 to 5, there will be 5 historical events. And on the right hand side of the screen, there will be 5 dates labelled A to E. All you have to do is simply match up the event to its correct date, and that can be done either by writing them all out and drawing lines, or it could be simply writing the event to the date, or even just writing the corresponding number to the correct letter. Without further ado, let's move on to the second category, events and dates, and your minute will start as soon as I finish reading out all of the events and dates. Events and dates. Number 1, Hadrian's Wall built. Number 2, start of 7 Years' War. Number 3, Zimbabwe gets independence. Number 4, beginning of Protestant Reformation. Number 5, the first use of gunpowder in warfare. The dates: A, 1756, B, 1517, C, 122, D, 919, and E, 1980. Your minute starts now. Halfway through. "15 seconds left. And that's your minute up, which moves us on to our third category, true or false. Very simple, you probably can guess what's coming next. 5 questions, all worth 1 point each. I will give you 5 historical statements, and you get a correct, and you have to get a point for each correct answer given. So you have to say which historical statement is true or false. So, without further ado, let's move on to the third category. Number 1. The 100 Years' War lasted 116 years. True or false? Number 2. In the 1904 Olympics, the winner of the marathon crossed the line hallucinating after eating rat poison. True or false? Number 3. Out of the around 2,200 people who were on the Titanic, only 7 survived. True or false? Number 4. The shortest war in history was between England and Zanzibar, lasting around 40 minutes. True or false? And the fifth and final question in this category. Number 5. In 1959, a world record 25 people stuffed themselves into a phone booth in South Africa. True or false? And that marks the end of the third category, true or false. Moving on now, if we're ready, to the fourth category, which came first. This category will be 5 questions long, all worth 1 point each, and I will give you 2 historical points in time, whether they be events, battles, deaths, inventions, etc. Inventions. And all you have to do to get the point is say which one came first out of the two. 15 seconds to answer each question as usual. So without further ado, let's move on to the fourth penultimate category, which came first. First question. Which came first? First Indian restaurant in the UK or the first Indian restaurant in the USA? Number 2. Which came first? The invention of Coca-Cola or the invention of ice cream? Number 3. Which came first? Poland invaded by Nazi Germany or Poland invaded by the Soviet Union? Number 4. Which came first? King Edward I crown or King Charles I crowned? And the final question, number 5. Which came first? The death of Albert Einstein or the death of Winston Churchill? And this brings us on to our final category, our fifth and final category, general history knowledge. So as usual, this will be 5 questions, all worth 1 point each, 15 seconds to answer each one, and they will be simple general history knowledge questions. All you have to do is write down what you think is the correct answer. So, the first question. Number 1. Qin Shi Huang, the first emperor of China, was responsible for which Chinese fortification in 221 BC? Number 2. Adolf Hitler was born in which country? Number 3. His failed attempt to kill James I in November 1605 was known as what? Number 4. Who flew the first powered aeroplane at Kitty Hawk in 1903? And final question of the quiz, number 5. Which German building was burned down in 1933? And that marks the end of the history quiz with me, Joshua Daniels, for May 2024. Hope you've enjoyed. Let's take a second just to compose ourselves, maybe get something to mark our questions with. And once we're all ready, we will move on to the answers, starting with the first category, going all the way back to famous faces. So, famous faces. Number 1 was Sitting Bull. Number 2 was Grace Kelly. Number 3 was Mary I. I will also accept Mary Queen of Scots. Number 4 was Malcolm X. Number 5 was Jimi Hendrix. Number 6 was Voltaire. Number 7 was Bruce Lee. Number 8 was George III. Number 9 was Lady Jane Grey. And number 10 was Laika the dog. The Russian dog, the first one to go to space. Number 2, events and dates. So, number 1, Hadrian's Wall built matches with C, 122. So 1 is C, 122. Number 2, the start of the 7 Years' War matches to A, 1756. So 2 is A. Number 3, Zimbabwe gets independence is E, 1980. So 3 is E. Number 4, beginning of Protestant Reformation was B, 1517, so 4 is B. And number 5, first use of gunpowder in warfare was D, 919. So, jot down which ones you got correct, point for each one. And if we're all ready, we are going to move on to the third category, true or false. So, number 1. True or false? The 100 Years' War lasted 116 years. It is true. It is 1337 to 1453. Number 2. In the 1904 Olympics, the winner of the marathon crossed the line hallucinating after eating rat poison. That is true. The 1904 Olympics were quite simply an absolute travesty. And actually, the original winner of the marathon was disqualified after he found out they were cheating by getting a car ride for 11 miles. The winner of the marathon also ate poisoned or rotten tomatoes, if I remember rightly, and I think most of the people in the marathon were actually vomiting and seriously ill along the way, and I think there was also some poisoning attempts of people. So actually, the 1904 Olympic was a wild ride. Number 3. Out of the around 2,200 people who were on the Titanic, only 7 survived. That is false. Just over 700 survived. Number 4. The shortest war in history was between England and Zanzibar, lasting around 48 minutes. That is true. Around 40 minutes. That is true. It is estimated it was around 38 minutes. Some estimates put it up to over 50. It was because the new Sultanate of Zanzibar refused to join with the British and then was threatened with war and after being quite frankly obliterated by the English Navy, they then surrendered. It was also happened on the 27th of August, which happened to be my birthday. And finally, number 5, in 1959, a world record 25 people stuffed themselves into a phone booth in Africa. That is true. Which brings us on to our next category, number 4, which came first? So, number 1, which came first? The first Indian restaurant in the UK or the first Indian restaurant in the USA? That is the UK. It was 1810 for the UK, 1913 for the USA. Number 2, which came first, the invention of Coca-Cola or the invention of ice cream? It was the invention of ice cream. I believe ice cream is thought to date back millennia in some way or in some countries, whereas Coca-Cola was 1886. Number 3, which came first, Poland invaded by Nazi Germany or Poland invaded by the Soviet Union? It was Poland invaded by the Nazi Germany. Nazi Germany was the 1st of September 1939, the casus belli for the Second World War, and the Soviet Union was actually on the 17th of the same month, so not too much difference between them. Number 4, which came first, King Edward I being crowned or King Charles I being crowned? It was King Edward I crowned. King Edward I was 1274 and Charles I was 1626. And finally, which came first, the death of Albert Einstein or the death of Winston Churchill? It was the death of Albert Einstein. Einstein's death was 1955, death of Winston Churchill was 1965. That brings us on to our final category, general history knowledge. Number 1. Qin Shi Huang, the first emperor of China, was responsible for which Chinese fortification in 221 BC? It was the Great Wall of China. Number 2, Adolf Hitler was born in which country? It was Austria. Number 3, the failed attempt to kill James I in November 1605 was known as what? The Gunpowder Plot. I will also accept Gunpowder Treason Plot or even just the Treason Plot. Number 4. Who flew the first powered aeroplane at Kitty Hawk in 1903? It was Wilbur and Orville Wright, or I will accept the Wright brothers. Although if you're going to put the names, it has to be both Wilbur and Orville Wright. And number 5. Which German building was burned down in 1933? It was the Reichstag. So I'd like to say a big thank you to you all for playing. Hope you enjoyed. Let me know in the comments your scores, and I would be happy to take on suggestions for any dates, periods, events, etc. for what I could cover in the next one. But if you all are finished and tallying up, I'd like to see you all next month, and thanks once again for joining me.